Welcome, everyone. I'm here with Bill Crawford, who used to be a stealth bomber pilot and still a friend. He didn't used to be a friend. He's still a friend.
Yeah, we're still friends.
Before I start asking Bill some questions, I want to share something with the audience. So there's this book that is literally about our business school class, okay? And there's a character in this book who we shall name Bob.
I remember Bob.
Okay, so I'm going to read two things. I had been placed, and this is the author, I had been placed between two students from the military. To my right was Bob, who had flown the stealth bomber. I had met him during analytics, and he frightened me. He was short and trim with strawberry blonde hair and pale blue eyes. He had 4 children and ate his lunch from a Winnie the Pooh plastic box that he brought from home.
That's true.
He seemed humorless and resolute, just the man you'd like to have flying billions of dollars worth of military hardware. He had come to business school because he had grown tired of Air Force life and wanted greater opportunities for himself and his family. He was 35 and had little time to waste. Now that's I'm not going to leave the audience with that.
Yeah, well, that's what's funny is there's how do I put this? It's 100% accurate from the author's perspective, but he misread the person, I think. And it was fun. It's fun to hear how he describes Bob, I guess.
Okay, so this is from page 209 toward the end. During my time at HBS, I often ran into Bob, my first semester section member, or section neighbor. All my early fears about him had dissolved. Behind the glacial Air Force exterior was a warm, funny man with an elegant mind and a keen ambition to do the best for his family. When we talked about our futures and the opportunities presented by HBS, we would always remind each other that the class of 2006 was not our peer group. Their average age on arrival was 27. They had not done the same things as we had. In many cases, all we had in common with them was HBS. We were not the classic HBS product, and if we tried to compete with those who were, we would be rejected. As we struggled to figure out our route back into real life, we had that to bear in mind. Staring up at the curve would kill us. So I knew you would cringe at the first one, so I'm like, I know he said something that would absolve that initial impression, which I thought was actually pretty funny, knowing you.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, because you and I we met after Philip and I met. Because Philip, so first of all, I think that for your viewers, I'm Bob, right? So like, we got to just make sure that's not ambiguous. Right. Philip sat to my left. And we sat together so you know how the first semester goes. We sat together for every class, every day for the first 3.5 months of school. And it's funny to think that he thought I was humorless. You know, I think that's kind of but I mean, I think
look, the Winnie the Pooh lunchbox, I'm like dead on, yes. 100%.
Yeah. You know, I'm a little bit sad to report that I had that Winnie the Pooh lunchbox when I was flying the F-16. So I got it in probably 1998. And I had it for my lunch all the way until about a year ago when my dog chewed it up. So I've been using that same Winnie the Pooh little soup container for, I don't know, 25 years. And no one ever made fun of me for it, you know, and
except in a book sold to thousands of people.
I don't know how many copies that sold. I hope it did really well. You know, to Philip Delves Broad, so to Philip, right? Yeah. It is the most accurate journalistic account that I've ever seen. Now that's not necessarily high praise, to be honest. Because I hold journalists in like lower esteem than politicians, mm-hmm. but
It is the most accurate account because when I've read it, I'm like, yep, that's true. That's true. Yep. That's accurate. That's accurate.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of our classmates didn't like it. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think there were a couple of people that weren't portrayed, I think, in a way that that reflected their best, and I think that's unfortunate. But my personal experience with the book was it was like reliving the best parts of business school, and some of the chicanery and some of the nonsense that goes on there. But I don't think it was written in a way that shed a negative light on the school, although the school felt that it did. It was kind of a okay, well, that I thought it was great. It was a really nice way to portray an immersive experience at the Harvard Business School, and probably if anyone who watches this and disagrees, I'll probably take some heat, but I appreciated what Philip wrote.
Yeah, look, I did too. But to be fair, though, right? He actually had toward the end, he had a very positive portrayal of all the former military officers.
Yeah, and I think people who look at the military from the outside, it's easy to be frightened. It's kind of funny because even like I work at a church university now as a professor, and even now, I'm Mr. Mellow. I'm Mr. Let It Go, easy going. But my colleagues have mentioned from time to time that they're still intimidated or a little bit frightened by me. I'm like, I don't understand where that comes from, but I think it has more to do.
I have a theory. Well, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I have a theory, and then you're probably going to say, I don't know what you're going to say, but my theory behind that is military culture is extremely direct, and there's no time to put a bow on things, and it makes you and the organizations you run much more efficient. But people just don't, especially people who are good politicians and like to hide and obfuscate things. They do not like that sort of leadership style.
Yeah.
And they shouldn't. But you know what? Like, they're the problem. We're not.
I feel like that's fairly accurate. The thing that I think I definitely have more of a no nonsense approach to problem solving. I'm much more comfortable with conflict. I embrace conflict. Yeah. And it doesn't mean that I do initiate it from time to time, but it doesn't mean I'm looking to be contentious. I'm not looking for a fight, but I am looking for a process that allows the best outcome. And that normally, when there's disagreement, conflict has to ensue. And when you avoid it, you don't get a good outcome. And so, and I think that's something that I still carry with me. But as far as like my I'm not gruff. I feel like I'm a lot more understanding, empathetic, kind, thoughtful. All the things you would want in somebody to get.
I've become a lot less that way.
Yeah,
because people in business tend to solve for themselves and not for the organization, and I'm much quicker to kind of throw that out the window. But because I would come into it thinking that everybody was out for the better part of the organization. I was consistently disappointed. And after a while, you're like, you know what? Like, I was giving all these people the benefit of that, but they're solving for themselves. Full stop. Not all of them, not all, but like the people that I typically get gruff with.
Yeah, enough to kind of make you bristle. Yeah, so I still feel like the way the organization works, and then also I tend to have I'm an intense person. I get really focused, and when I'm intense, it seems intimidating. I just don't read that in myself. I'm focused. I'm trying to think. I'm processing, and the expressions that come across, especially if I have a military history, seem a little intimidating. But I've tried to temper that a little bit over the last 20 years.
Yeah, I try to too, but you could take Sean out of the Army, but you can't take the Army out of Sean.
Yeah. Well, thanks for that trip down memory lane. That was fun.
Yeah, I was worried you're going to hear the first part. You're like, oh my God.
No. Even when I read it the first time, I thought, that's funny. I just think, oh, okay, well, I got to work on that. It's like
Well,
getting a 1-star review in my business. I'm like, okay, well, yeah, they're not wrong.
like when I read it, there were aspects of it that I thought were accurate, but the when I first met you, I didn't. You didn't come across as humorless to me at all. So I was surprised that was his first take on you.
Yeah.
But the Winnie the Pooh lunchbox, like the Family Man, in contrast to the kind of stealth bomber, like that juxtaposition, right. I'm like, that is dead on. Like Bill is the kindest, nicest, like one of the kindest, nicest people I know, yeah. And so like his read was definitely a little bit off at the beginning, but there are parts in there that just, without saying anything about like your personality, just that juxtaposition of like stealth bomber pilot and Winnie the Pooh lunchbox or box. I'm like, yep, that's Bill.
Yep.
And yeah. And then, but to his credit at the end, right? He like the stuff that he said about you at the end, I think made up for it. It made for a good read. So
yeah, Philip and I are still friends. It's we don't talk very often, but occasionally we connect and we get Christmas cards from each other.
Okay, now we're probably like 5 minutes in, and people are like, I clicked on this thing so I could like see and learn about a stealth bomber pilot. So yes. I'm going to ask you the most open of open questions, and then and then I'm going to stop interrupting you like I have been doing. But again,
I don't know if you can do that. I mean, give it your best shot here.
I'll try. How did you become a stealth bomber pilot?
This is so ever since I was a little kid, I wanted to fly. I don't know when that started in me, but I remember in the 3rd grade checking out books about astronauts and space, and I remember, I don't know how old I was, maybe 8. Star Wars came out, and we had Luke Skywalker and Han Solo flying their intergalactic spaceships, and I just had this dream my whole life of flying. And my dad was in the Navy, so we lived near some Navy stations, and you'd see the F-14s flying over and doing their training. And so I think I just had this long-term dream to fly. In fact, when I was 9 or 10, the Blue Angels came to an airport about 4 miles from our house, and part of their routine at the time, they flew right over our house. I mean, like literally a couple hundred feet. And so it just seemed like flying was something that was calling me my whole life. I served a mission for my church right out of high school, and then I got admitted to BYU, Brigham Young University in Utah. And I didn't have a lot of role models in my life who went to college. So I was kind of charting a little uncharted course for myself. In fact, I showed up there with enough money to pay 1 semester's tuition and a couple of months of rent, and that was it. And somehow I stayed continuously enrolled, financed the whole thing, got my pilot's license. I understood the criteria for being selected as a pilot. I just worked really hard. So physical fitness, academic fitness, leadership skills, and eventually got selected for pilot training. That's a year-long deal.
Now, when you went to BYU, did you do ROTC or did you just self-finance the education?
So at the time, I was too old for a scholarship. So I actually paid for my own school, even though I did do ROTC. Ended up getting, oh gosh, probably 2.5 years in, they had peace broke out in the world, and all of a sudden the Air Force was cutting back. And the year that I got there, I think 21 cadets got pilot slots at BYU. This is just BYU. Then a year or 2 later, there were just huge budget cuts, and the Air Force had a glut of pilots, and they decided they weren't going to train too many more. And they cut the number of slots for ROTC to 100. This was like for the whole country. So there's 140 ROTC detachments, 100 pilots. And this is going to sound wrong when I say it, but one of the guys told me, "Hey, look, you're probably not going to be a pilot because there's only 100 slots." And I said, "Gosh, you had me worried for a second there. As long as there's one, I'll be okay." But I told him, I said, "As long as there's one, I'll be okay." And ended up getting a pilot slot. In fact, at BYU, even though there were only 105 of us got pilot slots, we were very competitive. We understood the criteria that the Air Force is looking for, and and we were competitive, and so we got picked up. I ended up going to Shepherd Air Force Base, which is a kind of it's a high probability of getting a fighter if you graduate. And so from there, flew the F-16 for a couple of years. Loved the F-16. Loved flying that airplane. It's just a great machine. I loved the teamwork dynamic of it. I didn't love that we were gone 5 months out of the year. It was a heavy deployment job, and the Air Force was saying, "Hey, look, your next assignment is most likely going to be an unaccompanied tour to Korea." And right about that same time, the stealth community was hiring younger pilots. So I just gotten my 4-ship flight lead upgrade, and they were looking for younger crew because they had the senior crews all flying that brand new sparkly airplane, and they needed to start working down their experience level. And I just timed it just right. So I applied and got hired to that. It was a 4-year controlled tour, minimal deployments. I mean, I deployed
What's a
for
controlled
2
tour
weeks.
mean?
I don't know. I just said it. What it means is, at least the way I am using it here, it meant that I wasn't going to have to be reassigned for at least 4 years.
Okay.
So as a military officer, usually you can expect 18 to 36 months in a station before you move. And this was going to be a nice 4-year, and some guys had done 6 or 8. And I just wanted a good family life. So, so I was looking for some stability in my location and for my kids. And this was going to provide that. It also just happened to be, at the time, the most prestigious flying program that the Air Force had. And so
Probably in the world.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, well, I don't want to, there are people who've done some really prestigious things, but this was up there. And just because they were looking for younger people, I happened to meet the criteria they were looking for, and applied and got in. So flew the T-38 as an instructor for a year to kind of build a little more experience, and then went into the stealth bomber, and just had a really great time. Really appreciate the time that I had flying with those guys. But that was my path.
What exactly is a T-38, and how's it related to a stealth bomber?
Oh, so the stealth bomber, very expensive to operate, and I might be saying things a little wrong. So take everything I say with a grain of salt. I'll give you the truth as best I can, but my memory is not always that sharp. I think it cost about $20,000 an hour to operate a stealth bomber. So we go up for an average training mission of 4 hours. What's $20,000? $80,000. That's a staggering number if you think about it. $80,000 to do one training sortie for 2 pilots. So in order to keep the pilots proficient, but also keep the budget under control, they have the T-38. T-38 cost, I don't know, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 an hour to operate, and the pilots will fly in that. It's a twin engine, short wing, fast airplane. You'll see the most common view of these would be on Top Gun. The black MiGs from the early days. Those were F5s, but they're the same airframe as a T-38. So you can see that's what the airplane looks like, and there's just 2 seats in it, and you just go out and do aerobatics or low-level flying or formation or navigation, whatever your heart desires in that airplane. So we did that. I was in. Go ahead.
And then did you ultimately spend 4 years as a stealth bomber pilot, or longer?
No, yeah. Let's think. So I got there in 2000. It was about 4 years. Yeah. It would have been 3 as a stealth pilot because the first year was just T-38. and then upgraded to stealth pilot, and then a year later, mission commander, and then flew in the Iraq conflict, and then a few months after that, took a different direction.
Yeah, well, that's how we met.
Yeah.
How many pilots are on that thing? It's like two co-pilots, right?
There are two pilots. They call it a mission commander and a pilot just because they don't want to say co-pilot because that would make one of them feel bad.
Yeah, that sounds like Air Force. That sounds like Air Force.
Well, the Air Force, I think they do have pilots and co-pilots in other aircraft, but they wanted they wanted us to feel special. So they called us pilots and mission commanders.
And how many real world missions did you fly in the stealth bomber?
Actual combat missions, just one. But gosh, I don't know the actual numbers, but I think the average stealth pilot, you probably half of them fly a combat mission, half of them don't. And I can't remember the last conflict that the stealth was involved in, but I think that it's been a while since they've seen active combat.
Even in the Iraq War, well, the beginning of the Iraq War they did, but anything subsequent?
Yeah, so I can think of, I know they were involved in Kosovo. I know they were involved in Afghanistan in 2000, 9/11, 2001, right? And then they were involved in Iraq in 2003. And then the only other one I remember is some limited action in Libya when the U.S. went after, I think they went after Muammar Gaddafi, but I can't remember for sure. But I think there was some news on Libya engagements there. Otherwise, I don't think there have been. I'm not aware of any. I can't remember any right now.
Huh? And why? How is the stealth bomber program related to the stealth fighter program? Is it like the same group of pilots, or is it?
No. And it depends on what you mean by stealth fighter, because that term is sort of it's taken on different meanings over time. The original stealth fighter, the F-117, there were some people who flew that flying the B-2 bomber, but typically, it's just like I came from the F-16. It was just another program, completely separate. Now they'll call the F-22 or the F-35 are also considered stealth fighters. And the programs run independent of each other, but they do coordinate. They do train together. So they'll go out and I don't actually. I could say I can't talk about the nature of the missions, but that's true because I really don't know a lot about them.
Well, and I mean, yeah, that's actually a good question because you never really, which is kind of odd. You hear about the F-22 and the F-35. The F-35 is specifically, it's usually in the context of the Hangar Queen that it is.
Oh gosh, don't get me started on that. I don't know a lot about it, but I feel like we could have done a better job with that program.
Yeah, but you never hear about you hear about those two all the time, but you never really hear about the Nighthawk. Like what sorts of missions it does, and that was the one that was the airframe that was shot down over Kosovo, right? Or was that a bomber?
I think I can say that we lost an F-117 in Kosovo because that was public news. But as far as how it was lost, why it was lost, or anything else, I really probably can't talk about it. But they basically retired those airplanes. That's why you don't hear about them anymore. They've been retired for a long time. And they both, the B-2 and the F-117 both rely on stealth techniques to avoid radar detection, but they do it differently. I'll just put it that way. So there were different engineering requirements and different constraints that led to different way of planning and flying the two airframes.
Okay. And in terms of let's talk a little bit about the mission that you ran. Talk me through that. Like, how did you train for it? How did you prepare for it? And then what was it like when you ultimately executed?
So when you first start flying the stealth bomber, they start doing some long duration mission training, and your first step into that is a 24-hour simulator. So imagine getting in a simulator and just flying the thing for 24 hours. And it's kind of interesting because there's no real, I mean, there might be a console operator up there, but I think at some point during the night, it's just you and your crewmate in the simulator flying the airplane. So then you'll do a couple of longer missions. I did a 24-hour live weapon drop in Nevada. I did a 20-hour, and I can't remember if this is before or after the Iraq conflict, but I did a 20-hour mission where we took off out of Missouri. We flew west off the west coast of Oregon and Washington. We dropped some bombs on the target range in the snow in Alaska. Flew directly over Mount McKinley, and then headed down the Aleutian Islands at sunset and landed in Guam the next morning and went snorkeling in 80-degree water. So it was kind of I'll never forget that day, like that's a pretty interesting day. And then the specifics for the Iraq conflict, the 2003, we actually, as a group, mapped out the targets that we were going to hit. And I think there were 6 airplanes, 3 from, I don't want to say too much. There were 6, I don't know. By the way, probably most of what I'm saying all of what I'm saying is fine, but I just don't want to cross any lines. It's been so long. Yeah. There were six airplanes involved. In fact, I sometimes on this wall have a picture of that first night with all 6 airplanes kind of hidden in there. There's one big one and then several that are kind of off to the side. There were 6 airplanes, 6 B-2s. Of course, hundreds of Allied aircraft involved, but 6 B-2s in particular. And they mapped out an array of the targets in the computer and then laid that over a city in the American Midwest. And then multiple times would fly the routes exactly like they flew them over Baghdad, with the exact timing, the exact weapon settings, airplanes going exactly where they're supposed to go, all over that to get rid of that first night. And I remember there was a high level of tension, a high level of focus, people on edge leading up to those days. We knew it was coming. We just didn't know exactly when. So we had everything planned out to the minutest detail. And on that first night, it went off pretty much exactly as they planned. And then we looked at each other and went, "Oh, hey, there's going to be another night. Hey, there's a night 2. Hey, what do we do?" And we started, and we ran into what's called just a normal planning routine. There's a planning cell, mission planning cell, probably has 10 pilots in it, led by a lieutenant colonel who's got a lot of experience. On the first night of the war, I was not assigned to fly, and I was still too, I guess, I was definitely intent on helping any way I could. So I went into the mission planning cell, but I wasn't scheduled to do that. I wasn't assigned. And the lieutenant colonel in charge, his name was Vooter. I call him Vooter. That was what we called him. And Vooter kind of looks around the room and says, "Hey, there's a lot of people in here, and I know you're not all scheduled. So if you're not supposed to be here, I kindly ask you to leave." And not one person left. I just sat there like, okay, well. Then, nonchalantly, Vooter comes up to me and he's like, "Hey, merge." And I'm like, he's going to kick me out. He goes, "The colonel's going to be here in a few minutes and the trash is looking a little full. So would you mind emptying the trash out?" So like my role on the first night of the war was literally sitting in the mission planning room, emptying the trash so that it would look nice for the colonel when he came in. And by the way, I think you want the room to look nice, right? We're professional. Right. We want to make sure things are in order. Then I went
What were
down to
you?
the flight line.
Were you a captain or a major at that time?
I was a captain. Yeah, I
Okay.
never pinned on major on active duty. So I was still a fairly young, inexperienced captain. I just finished my mission commander upgrade training, and I was anxious to participate and help. As the first days of the conflict went on, I did get assigned into the mission planning cell. Spent a few nights there, and then it was my turn to go get ready to fly. So you pop out of mission planning, you go home and rest. Someone else plans your mission, and then you come in for a practice run. So you actually they still do the practice run, but they do it in the simulator. So they plug in Baghdad or wherever it is. You then are going to run that to maybe 1 hour, maybe 2 hours, just of the combat run, and then you go home and get your rest. Come back and there's probably a 2 to 3 hour mission briefing where they tell you the targets, the objectives. They give you that. It's a giant book, actually. It's a really thick book of information, which includes everything you need to safely navigate all the passcodes to get in and out of different countries on the way there, and then everything you need to know if something goes wrong. Um, uh, Survival, escape and evasion tactics, and resources. They review it all with you.
So in other words, like what the local flora and fauna is in that particular region, where to hide, where do they give you information on, like where other units are that could help, like friendlies, things like that?
Oh gosh, I at this particular time I don't remember that, but I think it's because if you think about it, we're still in the phase before any kind of ground troops have rolled in. So
well, there were ground troops. There were certainly ground troops in there. It's just,
well, yeah. I will put it this way:
not conventional.
The location of those troops was not. We did not have a need to know, right? So that wasn't going to be revealed to us. But if we were on the ground, need to know would probably change, and we get that information as needed. We had secure radios, so we could actually send. At the time, it was so long ago, but we could send rudimentary text messages secure by satellite back and forth, and had voice capabilities secure also if we did get shot down. So there were lots of resources figured out to help us.
Here's a crazy question that I don't even know the answer to, so just don't judge me when I ask this.
Yeah, I might not either.
I would think the answer is no, but we'll find out. So you typically hear of like U2 pilots with a little like poison pill that they have. Did you have anything like that?
Well, they gave us a gun with one bullet. I'm just kidding. No, that probably wasn't a sensitive joke. We didn't have anything like that. The goal for us was to complete the mission, survive, and do it honorably.
Now, did they give you any? You hear about these go pills? Did you have anything like that?
Oh yeah, yeah. In fact, I remember specifically not using them, and not for moral reasons. I've read some articles about the media often misinterpret what's going on. And hey, these guys had go pills and it made them more aggressive, and that's why they made these mistakes and killed innocent people. And you're like, that's not really how it works. It makes you a little more alert, a little more. That's I think that's it. Just alertness, focus. They're appropriate for the right time. I found myself on this mission, and our mission was 36 hours. It was about 18 in and 18 back, and most B2 pilots make the mistake. You're just so excited, you're like, your mind is wrapped up, and you're going to fly into a situation where you could be killed, where you could hurt innocent people inadvertently, or at the very least, if you're successful, you're going to do a lot of damage to enemy equipment and capabilities. And so they're just excited. I took the approach, and I was flying with my squadron commander, and I told him, I'm going to fly as long as you want me to fly. But if you get in the seat next to me, I'm going to get out. and I'm going to rest. So during my 18 hours over, I spent quite a bit of time in the back reading magazines and stretching out, and I did some, light exercises, and I slept. And I did that because I have heard that most pilots for the first 18 hours they're so wound up that they just both stay in the seat, focused all the way there, all the way across the target, and then once they're coming off target, they both have this huge letdown. And I wanted to avoid that, so I took the approach. I'm going to try to stay relaxed and be fresh when we come off target, and it worked really well. So my crewmate, he was able to get some rest, 3 or 4 hours of rest actually, and then I was able to switch out and rest. And I didn't want to take the go pills during that time because I knew in a couple of hours I was going to need to sleep. And if I had just taken a couple of those go pills, I might not get the rest I needed. So I may have set the record for the most sleep during a 36-hour stealth combat mission. I probably have it. I probably still have it, actually.
Nothing wrong with that.
I was just proactive in managing it.
Here's another morbidly curious question. You were on a flight for 36 hours.
Yeah.
Like, is there like a bathroom on board?
Yeah, there's a place to. It's a little potty in the back, and you don't use it. You don't use it for your ordinary liquid use because you don't want to fill it up. So we had typical Air Force issued piddle packs, which are just a little plastic bag with. Some of them have a sponge, but most of them have a little powdered agent that when it gets wet, it turns into a gel. So you I don't know if you're familiar with those, but you pee into them and then it turns into a solid and it doesn't drip out. It's kind of hygienic and sanitary. And we use that for most of our business. And, I don't think I ever used the sitter. I never actually had to sit down and take care of business that way. Maybe on that mission, but I just don't remember. I blocked it out.
Yeah, we weren't so fancy in the Army. We just
there wasn't room in your hardware to accommodate that.
Yeah, well, not like a latrine, but
not inside the tank.
Yeah, but there's plenty latrine. A lot more room to do our business because it's just the natural environment. But
you can just step outside.
Cop a squat. All right. So you mentioned that you did these practice runs over Midwestern cities or a Midwestern city. I don't even know if you identified the city or not. I can't remember.
No, so not in our conversation. I can't really remember which one it was. I think it was like Sioux City, Iowa. It was like someplace within an hour's flight of Whiteman. And, we'd fly over the city. I remember the city lights out there and, we just kind of do the dance in the sky above those guys. Actually, well, the reason I remember that, I don't remember if I was in one of those. I know that I did large force exercises over Midwestern cities. I can't remember if I know I wasn't in those night one practice runs because I wasn't scheduled for night one.
Well, the reason I ask is years ago, and I don't know if you'll even remember this, but you said that every time you guys would fly one of those practice flights, people would report UFO sightings. Is that accurate?
Gosh, I've said a lot of things that I don't.
But you never said it in a way that I thought that the impression I had when you said it was that the UFO sightings they were reporting was you guys, not that there was.
People have asked. I just don't. UFOs are kind of an interesting thing. I've seen some stuff recently in the news about them, and I'm like, man, there's some compelling evidence that something, there's some pretty powerful technology out there from someone that I don't know who it is. But when I flew, I guess I one time in an engineering conference, they asked me, have I ever seen a UFO? And my response was, I am a UFO, right? And so it's very, very possible that people report UFOs when the stealths are flying, but most of the stuff that we did was at such high altitude that it would be and at night, unlikely that your regular folks down on the ground would even know we were there.
Mhm. Now, in the course of your military career, have you ever seen anything that, in the skies that you would identify as a UAP?
Yeah, I guess
Unidentified aerial phenomena, whatever it is, something you just couldn't explain.
there were two instances that come to mind. The first one is when I was flying the F-16 over southern Iraq. It was a no-fly zone enforcement mission. It was a large group of coalition aircraft pushed in.
And this
But
is
I knew
Operation
that
Desert Fox?
this was before Desert Fox was before. No, Desert Fox happened after this. So this was before Desert Fox. It was a
Okay.
time when there was relative calm between the U.S. and the Iraqis. There hadn't been a lot of open hostilities, and we were just patrolling the no-fly zones. And but this
And was this
particular day,
an F-16 or stealth bomber?
yeah, F-16,
Okay.
broad daylight, and I was number 4 of the 4 ship. I was the furthest north on the far right-hand side, and I look out the left to see my formation, and when I looked out the right of the aircraft, which thinking back now I'm proud of, because single seat fighter pilots are supposed to have a clearing pattern to identify bogies or hostile aircraft. I looked out to the right where there shouldn't be anyone, and I just saw these bright lights off my wing. Can't remember, a little high or a little low, but just out a mile or two off to the right. And I just wondered, like, gosh, those look like flares. They look like flares to me. But I knew there was no friendly aircraft over there, and I knew if there was a hostile aircraft, it was close enough that we would have been engaged with it. And so I just thought, man, what is that? And it wasn't until years later that I wondered if it wasn't, visually aimed anti-aircraft fire or something like that, where, they were shooting up at us, but without any kind of radar guidance, just sort of looking for a lucky shot on us. So that's the first one. The second one was in the stealth at night, and it was. I can say that it was not in U.S. airspace, but I really can't discuss any more about like what it was. So
Okay. But it could have been of extraterrestrial origin. It could have also been of terrestrial origin.
most likely it was some a human
Right.
phenomenon, human generated phenomenon. But I really can't, because of the sensitive nature of the context of the situation. I really can't talk more about it.
But it was such that it happened so fast that you really didn't get an opportunity to actually see it or classify it. So in other words, and when I say so fast, it's not that it was moving so fast. It was just you recognized the phenomena.
We were like, oh, what is that? And then, that's, our sensors aren't picking it up. No one's telling us about it. And there's something flying in our vicinity that wasn't supposed to be there.
Okay. All right. I won't push on that anymore. I just wanted to. But that one, like the likelihood that was non-terrestrial is very low. Let's just say.
I think that's fair to say. Yeah.
The first incident you reported, though, sounds more like it's, closer to 50-50.
I mean, I just don't know. It was like I'm flying over Iraq, looking out the window. I'm like, I know I can see bright lights out there in broad daylight, but I don't know what they are, where they came from.
Was it like a flash, or was it more sustained?
No, they were sustained. It was like, man, what is that? Staying in the air. But like I said, I've heard that flares do that. I think that anti-aircraft artillery, you'd actually see some black smoke or something like that. And
Yeah, you would see some smoke. With flares, you would see like a descending arc. Is that what you
you
saw?
might, you might. I don't remember seeing that. That's the funny thing, right? Is like I just remember seeing like three, four, or five of these bright lights in the sky, kind of spaced out as though something had ejected flares. But my situational awareness at the time was there are no aircraft over there, so I'm not sure. Not sure what it was.
All right. Well, I'm not going to put you on the spot and ask you what you think it is, but because you don't know. I mean, it sounds like you don't know. You just don't
Yeah,
know.
don't know. Yeah,
Did you report it?
I don't remember. Like probably. You get back to the ground and they ask you everything that happened, and it seemed like something I would have brought up, but I don't remember.
Okay. All right. Yeah. And I imagine if it raised any alarm or concern, you would definitely remember it, right? If somebody like came and said, "Well, remember the thing you said? Like what?
Yeah.
Can you tell us a
Oh
little bit
yeah,
more?"
yeah. No one followed up with me. And I may not have brought it up. It's just one of those vague memories that I was like, that's weird. I don't know what that is. And I remember not reporting it on the radio. Remember just kind of because we tried to keep radio quiet when we were in Bad Guy Land, and so yeah. I mean, maybe it was another coalition aircraft that ejected some flares that I just didn't see, but it was awfully close for that to be the case. And maybe it was ground fire. I just don't know.
Do you recall the relative size, or I guess you couldn't really judge distance or anything like that?
No, yeah. I mean, it was a mile or two off my right wing, and I thought for sure it was flares, but I just couldn't figure out like who's over there because, to my recollection, I was the furthest should have been furthest north in that particular situation, and there wasn't any reason for anything else to be over there, but there was.
Were there any allied forces like the Brits or anybody else in theater at the time?
The way I remember this particular day, I think it was a larger force package, but like I said, we knew where everybody was, right? We had our assigned areas and responsibilities, and this was an area where there shouldn't have been anyone else. So it was probably the Navy. Now that I think about it, because the Navy's famous for being where they're not supposed to be.
Well, I mean, was it near the water or was it like in the desert?
No, we were multiple miles into past the no-fly zone, yeah. So, but the Navy, they operate in those same airspace. We all work together. We're all friends.
Yeah, they would still tell you, right?
Well, if they knew where they were.
I'm not sure whether or not you're serious right now.
Yeah, I'm actually a little serious. Yeah, maybe they just fly by a different set of rules. No, not lost, but they don't necessarily follow the same strict protocols that the Air Force is used to. The Navy's a little more, hey, go where you need to when you need to. So
that kind of sounds like the Marine Corps.
Yeah.
They're just a little special.
I feel like I'd fit right in the Navy. I think I would have had a great time flying with those guys. So
I don't think I could say the same.
Yeah.
I mean, I tried, but like the last test, like my head just couldn't fit in the jar, man.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm just kidding. I love Marines. They're the best. We trained with them at the National Training Center, and they were always fun. So
awesome.
Any advice to stealth bomber aspirants?
If you're a person who wants to fly a military combat platform, I don't have a lot of there's going to be all kinds of the modern way to get in, the way to succeed, and all that. The rules probably changed so much since I did it that I wouldn't have a lot of advice for that. But I would say figure out what they're looking for, understand the criteria, and then just be relentless in making sure that you meet those criteria better than anyone else. And if you're willing to do that and you're physically qualified, your chances are pretty good. So it surprises me how many people give up when they see something is really hard. They'd say, well, the chances of getting into a military flying slot, I don't know what they are, 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000. Well, that's only because most people give up. Of the people who are qualified and relentlessly focused on it, the chances of success are very high. And so I think that's my best advice is if it's something you want to do, put your mind to it and then get to work.
It's basically the same advice one would give to somebody who's trying to be a writer or trying to start a YouTube channel.
Yeah, or open a small pizza place, or get into Harvard Business School.
That's right.
They say they accept like 1 out of 9 applicants at Harvard Business School, but the truth is, of the people who take the time to understand the criteria, who then prepare themselves for it, and who are determined, I bet the admissions is 75% or higher. It's just that most people don't really figure out, they don't spend the time to figure out what are the rules of the game, and then how do I play so that I win. It doesn't matter what you're doing if you can figure out the rules of the game you're playing in, and then do it, you're going to do fine.
All right, my friend. I appreciate your time on telling people about your experiences, because there's not very many stealth bomber pilots or former stealth bomber pilots. So thank you for your service to the country as well.
Thank you.
Putting your life in harm's way, literally. So anyway, I'm looking forward to talking to you about our next topic.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. If you enjoyed this video, hit like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.